Hey, thanks. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me today. My name's Houston White. I'm the digital marketing specialist with the brand and marketing team for UBC. So that means I take care of all of our digital ads and all of our social media channels. So at UBC on Twitter, the main UBC Facebook page, we're on Instagram and LinkedIn as well. Those are the big ones. So today I'm going to talk to you about some of our kind of high-level social media best practices, how we approach it at the UBC brand level, and then dive into a few tips and tricks that you can use when you're using it. Feel free to jump in with any questions along the way if you have them. This is pretty informal and meant to be helpful to you, so feel free to do that. So what do we use social for at the university? Well, we use it to really amplify stories that celebrate what's happening to UBC. It's a really powerful storytelling platform for us. And it's also a place that we have conversations. So we're in a continual conversation with our students, faculty members, staff, and actively to people out there as well. So people who are talking about UBC. As our university evolves, our social presence is also evolving with it. So what we did a year ago on Facebook is different now. What we did 2 years ago on Instagram, we barely had Instagram then. So it's really fast moving, and that's what makes it kind of exciting. Taking a step back, sometimes people who aren't familiar with social media ask why. Why is it so important? It's just a bunch of people tweeting. But this is why it's important to the university. We use it to raise our profile and to deepen engagement. So social media is not kind of the end goal. We don't aspire to have the best Facebook page of any university. Social really supports institutional priorities. So it's a driver of and the enabler of communication for us. There's critical mass there. So our social channels allow us to reach a large number of our target audiences very quickly, very easily, and very efficiently in terms of cost. It's really cost effective and highly targetable. So we have our broad organic audience, but we can also use paid social to really specify quite granularly who we're looking to speak to with different types of content. It creates connection and engagement. Unlike a broadcast email or a digital sign, it's two-way, and that means you need to approach it a bit differently than more traditional broadcast channels. It enables us to respond quickly to positive and negative events. So a good example of this is when it snows, we need to communicate to people what's happening, and social helps us do that. But it also helps us highlight how fun campus is when it snows. So like a snowball fight video, for example, was one of our top pieces of content last year. And the last piece that really makes social really interesting is that there's so much data. So we can really, by choosing the right pieces of data to look at, make some really smart decisions about what we're doing, what content's working, and how we can more effectively reach the people that we're trying to. When we're approaching any sort of communications challenge on social media, we really want to start with what we're trying to achieve. So instead of rushing straight to, oh, this is happening, we just got to tweet it, we try to park the tactics, at least initially, and think about what we're trying to do, who we're trying to reach, and what types of content we might use to do that. Only then, once you know that, can you start to pick the tools off the shelf and get more specific about the tactics that you're going to use. The other thing that we're really mindful of, and this is something that we try to establish across the university, is that creating and managing social media channels is a lot of work. It's a massive investment that people often underestimate. So often when people kind of say, I want to start a new channel for this thing, they're not quite aware of what it takes to actually manage that on an ongoing basis. So one of the things that we suggest to people is if you're thinking of it, there might be other channels at UBC that you can partner with who have existing reach with the people that you're trying to talk to, who can help share your content instead of having to do it all on your own. If you do choose to do it all on your own with a new institutional account, you know that you're entering a really crowded landscape. So last summer I had a student staff do an audit of all of our social media channels at the university, and these are just official channels of parts of the university. There's over 500 of them, and she ran out of summer before we ran out of accounts, so there's likely many more. And so that's a lot. That's a lot of noise. It's a competitive landscape, and so you really need to invest in order to rise above and actually connect in that type of place. The other thing that you need to make sure is that if social media is for you, make sure that you're really supported in your strategy and make sure that you're being resourced correctly and have the training and skills needed to successfully manage the content and the communities that you're building in the fast-paced environment that is social media. So what does it take? This kind of breaks it down a little bit and talks about what's actually required when you're managing a social media channel on behalf of an organization. There's really 4 key areas. So the first one is about strategy. Are we going to be on Twitter? Are we going to be on Facebook? Are we going to do Instagram or Snapchat? Those platform decisions are important to think about. Audience research. If we're trying to reach, say, prospective students, are they on LinkedIn? Maybe not. Maybe another platform would be better for that. What are our goals? And how might we integrate social media with the other communications that are going out? So instead of looking at social in a silo, look at your communications landscape overall. Do you have an email newsletter? Do you have a website? Those things should work together instead of exist as separate things. Content creation. So social media is a place for content, and this is one that people often underestimate the amount of work that it takes. You need to be writing copy, creating photo and video assets, designing graphics, and then writing the content that you're linking to in some cases too. So you need a content strategy in order for social media to work. Community management. So how do you respond to and interact with your followers? How do you answer questions? Is there a framework that you use to approach these types of things? And then analysis, looking at how your content's performing, looking at what your competitors are doing, keeping on top of best practices, looking at the performance of your different channels, and then reporting out. Like I mentioned, approaching social in a silo is not the most effective way to do it. And so at the university level, we really look at all of our different channels as a digital ecosystem. So we aim for the right content on the right channel at the right time. And really, these are all the different ways that we can communicate, and we'll use different channels for different types of things. But this is basically the landscape that we have. So in communications and marketing or brand and marketing, we take care of the central social channels in ubc.ca. In public affairs, which is more focused on media relations, they have their own Twitter account, and they email with the media and have their own website. And then internal communications is the group that communicates with faculty and staff. So they have their UBC Today newsletter and a website as well. So often, though, a piece of content, say that's designed for an internal audience, will show up on ubc.ca and on our social channels too, if we determine that the audience for that content is also present on those channels. The other thing that's important on this slide is that these are just the top-level university channels. There are, like I mentioned, hundreds of other faculty, department, unit, audience-specific channels that feed into this. So we're constantly curating content from the rest of the university and looking for opportunities to amplify that content for people so that we can not have to do it all on our own, right? There's lots of people around this university that are creating great content, and so we really want to help amplify that content for them. We're just the stewards of the central channels. We're not the owners of them. So we take care of them on behalf of the whole university. And if it's a fit, we want to help share your content there. So some key considerations if you're planning on producing social media content. The first thing to keep in mind is what an on-brand social media channel looks like. So UBC social channels are required to have an avatar in its official format. Twitter's actually changed to a round one now, so they look a little bit different. But this is a way to instantly infuse your social channel with credibility. This is a way that people can know instantly that this is actually officially a part of UBC. And so in that crowded social media landscape, it's really easy for you to kind of get behind the mothership and leverage a lot of the brand work that's been happening centrally, as well as all the other work that other communicators are doing to kind of build the collective UBC brand. If you don't have these, you can request them at brand.ubc.ca/social media. And then there's your content. So what does on-brand content look like? It needs to be representative of a leading university. And so language and media should be engaging, bold, responsive, shouldn't be overly promotional. And our brand site at brand.ubc.ca unpacks this in a lot more detail. So I encourage you to go there and look at the different toolkits that we have so you can kind of understand what types of content we're trying to produce and that we found success with. So here's just some examples of social content that we published. Engaging images, catchy writing. This is the type of stuff that people like to see and that they engage with on our channels. The other thing that is sometimes difficult to think about, because we manage social channels typically from a computer, but our audience, the vast majority of them consumes that content on a mobile device. So whenever you're creating any sort of social media content, you really need to be thinking about what that user's experience is going to be on their phones. Plan your content for a small screen. If your graphic has a lot of text in it, say you used a print poster and you're just putting that on Twitter as a graphic, people aren't going to be able to read that on their phone. And typically social channels will compress the quality of images too. So you need to be really mindful that your content that looks good on a big, large monitor might not translate well to a mobile phone. Upwards of 70 to 80% of our social media audience that we see is on mobile devices. So if you're not doing this, you're eliminating the bulk of the people that you could be reaching. So this shows what a Facebook post looks like on desktop. And then you can actually, in Facebook ads, see previews of your content before you publish it if you're curious to see how it might translate to a mobile device. Tone and style of writing. We have a guide for that. So if you're confused about anything from, do I capitalize this word to, what's the voice and tone of the university, you can go to brand.ubc.ca writing to learn more about that. Basically, on social channels, it's the first 80 characters that really matter the most. Some social channels will actually truncate after that point, so you have to click more to read more. So if you have a really long post, you need to be mindful that not everyone will see that entire thing, at least initially. And then we try to resist sensationalism or spam-type clickbaity language. We're a university with lots of smart things to say, and so we tend not to kind of go to that place when we're publishing content. Our audience will call us out on it too sometimes. And then the last little tip that I have is around hashtags, which is something that people spend a lot of time thinking about and stressing about in my experience. And a lot of that is kind of overthinking it. So hashtags are really just an opportunity for conversation. Before you go and invent a new hashtag, you'll want to research commonly used hashtags for the discipline or field that you're talking about. If you're kind of not sure what to use, hashtag UBC is one that lots of people use to see what's happening at the university. You're better to use an existing hashtag and leverage that community and access that community than to kind of go it on your own and create one that maybe you're the only one using. And that's kind of a good rule of thumb. If you're the only one using your hashtag, you really need to be thinking again about whether or not that's actually a valuable piece to have in your social media content. The other thing to keep in mind with hashtags is they're only really relevant on Twitter and Instagram. So lots of people spend a lot of time stressing on them when, if the bulk of your reach is happening on Facebook, it doesn't really even matter. And lastly, if you have any questions, part of my job is to help and support people across the university with their social media campaigns, issues, questions. If you want to dip your feet into paid, any of that type of stuff, happy to help with that. So this is how you can reach me. And at this point, it's over to you. Do you have any questions that you'd like me to answer? Yes.
Dip your feet into paid.
Yeah.
Shell out money to have you help us target.
So paid social media is like Facebook ads, for example. It is one form of paid social. Paid social media can do a couple things for you. If you want to just reach more people on a channel like Facebook, you can pay Facebook and build an audience and reach more of the same people than what they would give you organically. The other thing that you can do, and this is where the real power of it is you can get really specific about who you want to target. So you have a piece of content, for example, We did a story, the Faculty of Medicine did a story on a new residency program that's based in a few communities in the BC interior. Great, interesting content for our broad audience, so we published it organically, but then we used a bit of paid social to target people specifically in those communities to really connect that content with people who really have a connection to it. So you can either reach more of your audience or you can reach kind of exactly who you want, quite specifically. And it doesn't take a lot of money. So if you're trying to promote an event, or if you have a piece of content that has a natural audience for it, paid social can be a really cost-effective way to make that more successful. Has anyone tried any paid social before? No, that's okay. Sure. No, that's you. Yeah.
I'll just keep talking.
Yeah.
So you do things like, how on Facebook people put where they graduated from and so on. So could you target through paid social media? And do we do that to our alumni engagement?
Depending on the campaign, depending on who they're trying to reach, yes. So if we're trying to reach an alumni audience, we can say people who are interested in the University of British Columbia, who say they went to the University of British Columbia. We can say we want undergrad students who are graduating between 2018 and 2019. You can get very specific. But the thing that you need to be mindful of is you can overshoot with being too specific and eliminating people who might be interested in it as well. So it's kind of in Facebook, even when you're building audiences, has a bit of a needle graphic that helps you find the right balance, because you're trying to narrow down and get specific, but you don't want to get too specific that your audience is like 50 or 100 people, then it's not really an effective use of your money. But you can target on demographics, you can target based on interests, you can target based on people who visited your website. If you installed a Facebook pixel on your website, you can target people who've engaged with your page in the past 6 months or year. There's lots and lots and lots of ways that you can build really effective audiences with paid social. Yeah. Yes.
So are you available at Central to help groups that might want to be advertising events for a centenary program or something like that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Particularly if you want to cross demographic groups, because when the school's been around for 100 years, there's a variety of age groups you might want to target.
Yeah. Depending on the campaign, we might not be able to do it for you, but we can definitely advise on any types of paid campaigns that you'd be looking at running. Happy to help with that. Yeah. Often, sometimes too, we'll run campaigns for departments. So like Zatara, for example, when they're running MBA campaigns, they'll allocate some spend to come from the main UBC page as well. So depending on what you're looking to do, we can talk and see what the best way to approach it would be. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Yes.
In an earlier slide, you talked about strategy and training.
Yeah.
So 2 questions. One is, where would you recommend getting training? And how do you develop let's say, a Twitter strategy? How do you develop a plan?
Where you can get training, there are a few different places depending on kind of where you're starting from. Formerly continuing studies, but now these programs have moved to Sauder's continuing studies. They have a social media program that they offer that's really good, and I think still available with tuition waivers. As UBC staff and faculty, we also have access to lynda.com. So lynda.com, if you go to, I think it's lynda.ubc.ca, log in with your CWL, there's a vast library of online courses that you can use. The other thing that we manage centrally is the social media meetup group. So if you're managing a social channel and you want to meet with and connect with other people on campus who are doing the same thing, we have a mailing list and a Slack group, and we meet every couple of months to talk about what's going on in social and share best practices and stuff like that. So those are three things that you could do depending on what you're trying to get at. In terms of building a strategy, again, you got to start with what you're trying to do. So am I trying to reach more alumni? Am I trying to connect with an internal audience? Start with that and then kind of build downwards from there. If you'd like, I have examples of or templates of plans that I could share with you. But really, it's about resisting the urge to jump straight to tactics. We've been saying, we need a Twitter strategy. It's like, well, maybe Twitter isn't even the thing that you need. So it's important to think about, okay, what are we actually trying to achieve? And then pick the right tools to do that. And social might be just one of them. Yeah. Yes.
So a hypothetical situation, say you're trying to create a social media strategy within a given team.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about how much people often underestimate the amount of time that takes.
Mm-hmm.
So could you give an example of, say, if you wanted to run a low to medium kind of sized campaign, how many hours are you looking at in terms of one person's role?
It's tough to give a number of hours, but it's not something you could give to a student staff member, for example. Depending on how high volume you are and what your audience is and what channels are entailed in that, if you're just managing a Twitter account for a more internal audience, pretty simple and probably wouldn't take you more than a few hours a week. If you have a set of channels and you're doing content marketing and maybe even a bit of paid, then you're looking at, a big chunk of a full-time person's time. So that's the range. Yeah. Any other questions? Not, there's another presenter, so we'll get Britney out. Thanks, everyone. And there's my contact information again if you missed it.
Okay, so my name is Dennison. I work with John over at the School of Nursing for the Men's Health Research Program. So I'm hoping I don't overlap too much with Houston. If I do, just take it as it's doubly important to know. But I'm going to go a bit more granular in terms of what you might be able to do as a researcher or as a health researcher and how you might be able to use the social media for your own sort of promotion in terms of publications or projects or events or things like that. So some of this is going to feel very similar. So coming back to the idea of why are you using social media. So again, it's knowing sort of what your goals are in mind and, again, starting at the end. So what I want to do is go through a couple questions you might want to ask yourself before you start determining whether or not you want to jump in with both feet. So the first question is, who is your audience? So you kind of want to ask, who am I trying to reach with my social media channels? Are you offering a service, or are you offering a project that is maybe an intervention where you want to reach the general public? Do you want to promote your research or be seen as an expert in your field with other organizations or other universities and researchers that are out there? So there are tons of questions you want to go through in terms of determining who you want to reach, and that will help with determining what platforms you want to use as well. And then again, just sort of avoiding the idea of the shiny object syndrome, which is because people love social media and everyone's using it, we should jump on every single channel. So that's not always the ideal way of doing things. So again, figuring out who your audience is, but also who you are. So this comes back to the idea of brand. So when Houston talked about UBC has its own brand strategy, right? So what is their personality online? What are they trying to achieve with that? So when you create your own social media channels, you have to ask the same questions. So what is my online personality? Why would somebody go to me instead of somebody else for this information? What am I offering to them that's unique or new or interesting in terms of the content? And that's looking at, again, going back to the audience, are you trying to connect with businesses in terms of, other organizations or other researchers, or are you trying to connect with sort of a consumer, so a general public or somebody who might be interested in your content? So the key is to define those two things before you even move ahead with, okay, well, what's my platform? What am I going to do? So first, who's my audience, and then who am I? So that you can create a strategy that connects those two things really well with one another. So if you decide you're going to move ahead and you know social media is for you, and you know that you want to sort of go ahead and pick your platform, then what you have to do is sort of go through all of the different options that you have available. And I know we went through a list already. There are tons and tons of options and more being created every single day. So it's about knowing where you've defined your audience, so where do they live? You know, so Facebook is a bit more personal. So if you're using Facebook, what's the strategy for that? You're trying to connect with someone who might be sharing things with their friends or connecting with family members. So it's a much different audience than you would get on, say, LinkedIn or even Twitter, which is a bit more professional in terms of the audience. So depending on your goals, there are arguments for probably one platform or another, and it also depends on your content. So is your content more visual? What are you trying to share? And so that will help you determine what platforms will work for you as well. So now I want to go through just a couple of really quick best practices that I found work really well. The first one is that it's always quality over quantity. And this doesn't go just for content, it also goes for your numbers. So a lot of people sort of get held up on the idea of, should I have a certain number of followers? Oh, my goal this year is going to have this many people on my account. Those kinds of things are, while important, they're not the most important. You want to focus on the quality. So if you have a ton of content going out but it's low quality, then you're going to start having followers who disengage with you, who aren't interested. Even if you have less content, if it's really good quality, then it will be much better for you. And the same goes with followers. So if you had 10,000 followers, but none of them ever engaged with you, you never got a notification or a retweet or a share, then that's not the kind of follower you want. It'd be better to have 1,000 of really engaged followers who are constantly sharing your content, asking you questions, engaging with your research and your social media feeds. The next best practice I wanted to go through is sort of the idea of curating and creating, and this goes back to the idea of self-promotion. So it's kind of an interesting idea because a lot of times you get into social media because you want to self-promote. That's sort of the idea, right? You want to share your own content, you're creating things, you want it to go out there. But people don't follow accounts if they're always just promoting themselves. So it's kind of a nice balance between curating and creating. So if you're curating content, again, you can go back to the goal of your social media feed. So for example, if you're an expert in a field, say you're an expert in looking at technology and the intersections of like e-health, then you'd want to curate content that relates to that, whether it's news articles or facts or information or graphics or infographics, even if it's not necessarily your own content. So it's good to intersperse both of them throughout your feed so that when people are like, oh, I really need some information or I'm really interested in this topic, people will go to you. They'll say, you know, this is where I go for all of this information. And just as an example, even mainstream media sources curate content. So you have places like CBC who's constantly promoting and producing their own content. Even they'll share other content if it's related to something that they're working on. So we talked a bit about social media management earlier, but it's always good to reiterate that social media needs somebody to manage your platform. And the key is to remember that it's not a one-off. It's much worse to have bad social media than to have none at all. So that's the key, is to know that if you're going to have it, you want to have good content, and that it is a bit of a dedication in terms of time and resources, and making sure that not only is there content, but there's daily content, because nothing looks worse than somebody who goes to a Facebook page and sees that they haven't posted in 9 months or something like that. So it's always much better to make sure that you have somebody who can be there to manage. And also, this is really key in terms of engagement. So if you have people that are messaging you or sending you, facts or information, and you don't have someone sort of controlling that, then you sort of start losing your followers, because they're like, well, they don't really care about me, they don't care about my, my interest in them. And so you want to be sure that you're there to sort of answer those notifications, message people back if they're sending you messages. We also talked a bit about social media campaigns. So this is a little bit from my experience, a little bit different than your overall strategy. So you have your brand strategy and your personality online, but a social media campaign is something that you would want to do for a very specific reason. So say you have a survey you're promoting or a publication that has just come out, or you have an event that's upcoming and you want to create a campaign around that. That's a whole separate strategy that needs to come into play. So again, are you creating paid ads? If so, who are you targeting and why? And then creating in advance sort of the content that you want to come out. So say you're like, okay, well, you know, I would like to sort of reference this a couple different times, and if it's a publication, knowing how to do that differently. So say, okay, I'm going to share some facts, some quotes, I'm going to share some articles that are relevant, that may not be mine, but are similar, and just sort of creating that ahead of time so you're not sort of scrambling to figure out, okay, how do I use social media now to do this one thing I want to do? You want to just have it done in advance so that you can really share unique and interesting content to your followers. Sorry, this one is a little bit different. So I wanted to talk really briefly about, say you've decided, you know what, social media is not for me. I don't want to create my own feed. That doesn't mean that you can't use social media for other reasons. So social media can have really, really, really rich data sets, and you can go in there to inform your own research. So I have a really quick example based at UBC. There were a couple of researchers here who analyzed the I don't know more hashtag and then created a bunch of publications about how the online activity from I don't know more translated into real action outside and what that meant. So there are lots of different ways you can use social media research and use the data sets that you can access to actually inform your own research. So what are people talking about? What are the online conversations that are happening? You can use paid tools or free tools to analyze this kind of data. There's a tool online called Crimson Hexagon, which is really robust. It does cost money, but you can use that to sort of analyze things in terms of like sentiment. So what are people saying? Is it positive? Is it negative? You can narrow down geographically where are people saying things and why. And so it could be really great if you aren't using social media to sort of do knowledge mobilization. There might be applications in terms of your own research and informing your own data. So the other thing I wanted to do really quickly was go through a couple case studies that I've sort of been working on. And I wanted to start with Heads Up Guys. So Heads Up Guys is a program that's run out of UBC Psychiatry. And they're an online e-health intervention program for men with depression. So the interesting thing about Heads Up Guys is that they're looking more specifically at reaching the general public. And the reason why is because they're offering a resource to people. As you can see, I'm not sure if you can actually because of how small it is, but they have more than 18,000 Facebook followers. And part of the reason why is because Facebook seems like the perfect venue for this because it's a very personal topic. Their audience is a general public, and this is the audience that lives on Facebook. If you contrast, their Twitter actually has only a little over 2,000 followers. So the difference here is the audience. So their Twitter feed is slightly different. They're not trying to reach the general public through their Twitter feed. They're trying to connect with businesses, organizations, other researchers. They're creating themselves a niche so that they're recognized in the field of research that they're doing. So their Facebook and their Twitter have very different strategies. So you may have more than one platform and more than one account, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the content can easily shift over. You have to have different strategies for your different audiences and what they might be looking for. I also wanted to share the Men's Health Research Twitter account. So again, Twitter is our main focus versus Facebook because what we're looking to do is we're looking to curate content, we're looking to promote our own content in terms of events, publications, new research that's out, new projects that are being pushed out. So you can see here sort of the first tweet up here is a project of the Men's Health Research Program called Contact Unload. That was at the Invictus Games. So that kind of stuff is the kind of stuff we want to be sharing on our social media feeds. And again, this is a really interesting audience because they're extremely engaged. So this audience is one where, we come in and we have tons and tons of notifications every day because people are really engaged in this sort of niche that we've tried to create for ourselves. So looking specifically at other organizations interested in men's health, other organizations doing similar projects to us, and other researchers, so that we can share all of our new projects and our new publications with people. I also do double time over at the journalism school, so I wanted to share our social media feed there. So I work with the Global Reporting Center over at the School of Journalism, and this one's interesting too because our Facebook is kind of abysmal compared to our Twitter. And the reason is the opposite of the heads up guys reason, which is that people looking for global news aren't going to Facebook for it. If people are sharing news on Facebook, it's because their friends are sharing it, right? So in order for us to reach the audience we want to reach, Twitter seems like the best place for us because the topic areas that we specialize in are living on the Twitter feeds instead. So looking at global health or reporting in indigenous communities. And again, this is kind of nice because I wanted to sort of share that, again, pushing the content that's coming out from all around us. Any partners, anyone at the university. So you can see here the first thing that's shared on the page is from the UBC journalism program. And so making sure that you're sort of curating that content that is interesting to your followers and not just necessarily pushing your own content out. The other one I wanted to share was, sorry, I went too far, was the Still Here project. So this is a brand new social media feed. And it was a bit of a discussion to figure out sort of where this project would live. So this project is out of the Men's Health Research Program at School of Nursing, and it's a photo voice project. So knowing that we had all of these beautiful images, all of these people had invested all of this time in taking these photos, we were trying to decide where this might live. And so the decision was to go to Instagram. So we share the photos on here, and again, this is where the hashtags really do come in handy. So Instagram allows you to have like 30 hashtags, and this is really where you find your audience, is being able to sort of put those hashtags in there, and again, ones that already exist. So we're looking at, the LGBTQ community, so seeing where people are having conversations online about this already, and then tapping into those conversations. And then I wanted to share this really interesting sort of tidbit about this Instagram feed, which is it's sort of brand new, and it only has 100 followers. But the interesting thing about it is that the engagement rate so far on the Instagram is 60%. And the average Instagram engagement rate is less than 1%. So it's about building our followers slowly so that we're only getting people really who are interested in what we're doing, who are going to engage with us, who are going to leave comments, who are going to share the information with others. So again, it's about sort of strategizing, okay, well, if we want to grow our followers, but we want to do it in a way that people are still being engaged, it's creating strategies around that instead of just saying, okay, let's try to grow it to like 5,000. It's about knowing sort of what kind of audience you want and making sure that those are the people you're targeting. The other quick ones I wanted to share were you can also use social media as an individual at UBC. So you can create your own social media accounts that would help sort of promote your research, focusing on similar things. You could focus on topic areas that you are an expert in that might be of interest to people who are following you. I started with President Ono because he is sort of a social media maverick. He has a huge following and is incredibly good at it. He is great at engaging with students, faculty, staff, promoting research at the university. His feed is always engaging in terms of visual content. So as just like a suggestion, if you're interested in Twitter, I would peruse through these feeds just to see what kinds of content is being shared and how, because some of them are really successful. As an example from a professor, Taylor Owens, who's at the Liu Institute, has a really great social media feed. He focuses on the intersections of technology and journalism, and so his entire feed is curated content and shared content from his own projects about that topic. So he's created a very specific type of feed that if that's the kind of information you'd want, that's where you'd go. The other example I wanted to give was Joan Zatara at UBC Okanagan, who is with the Men's Health Research Program. The great thing about Joan is that she's really great at engagement. So her follower count isn't necessarily through the roof, but if you are following her or she's following you, she's incredibly engaged. So you get messages and retweets, and she's always sort of following up with what you're doing, and so that's the kind of account you want to create. Again, it's a bit of a time dedication, but she's the kind of person who once you follow, you're going to keep following because she's going to keep engaging with you. So that's just a couple examples of some individual accounts and how you might be able to use it for your own use as a researcher at the university. So that's it. So I just wanted to say that, again, sort of the key things to remember are to just know your goals beforehand. Know why you're approaching social media and what you want to gain from it. My email's here as well, so if anyone wants to get in contact with me, I'm happy to answer any questions as well. And if you have any now, I'm happy to answer them too. Thanks. Yep.
A question about scheduling.
Yep.
Do you do that? And do you think it's a benefit?
Yes. So yes, definitely. So scheduling tweets, I think, is really important. So I think UBC uses Hootsuite. We use Buffer, both at the Global Reporting Center and the Men's Health Research Program. And this is perfect for somebody like me because I split my time and I do both accounts. It's great because if I'm working with Men's Health Research on Monday and Tuesday, I can pre-schedule for the entire week ahead of time. So I know that there's always going to be daily content, and I know that people are always going to be sort of engaging with our stuff. So I think it's really important, and there are tons of free tools you can use. Hootsuite you can get free accounts for, Buffer you can get free accounts for, and then you can sort of pre-schedule everything in advance. And then deal with anything that might be urgent or important to share as it comes to you. But having sort of that buffer of having all this content already there is really important because it stops you from scrambling as you go, being like, oh no, we have nothing and I need to come up with some content so we're not dead for the next 3 days or something like that.
Suites used to have free scheduling, but now they're limiting that. They just recently started that.
Okay. There are other tools you can do too. The Hootsuite Pro, I think, is really inexpensive as well. So their next tier for free might be $20 or something.
Yeah, and the buffer is really inexpensive too for the first tier as well. Yep, so Buffer does all of the Twitter scheduling. It can also do Facebook scheduling for you. So, and it's a great tool as well. It's a little pared down compared to Hootsuite, but if what you're trying to do is just scheduling and you're not analyzing anything in terms of data or hashtags or things like that, Buffer is kind of good because it's a little bit more straightforward, whereas Hootsuite is a great tool, but it's robust and it's a little less user-friendly. Yeah. Yep, you're welcome. John?
What's an example of being surprised by social media campaign?
Being surprised by a social media campaign. I guess I had a really interesting experience working at the journalism school. We created this tiny little project and didn't really think anything of it, but then we decided it was a video project, and then we decided, okay, well, let's try out social media for the videos because we've never really done it before, and then created very specific social media videos, which means you have to think about people on mobile, think about people who are viewing it without audio, so you have to sort of subtitle everything. And without really thinking about it and putting in very little money in terms of paid ads, we had more than 100,000 views of these videos, which was just insane, and we didn't think that we could do that. I think another great example, John, was actually the prostate cancer one that you did, because I think we launched this website and this survey, and we had a lot of help with UBC, with applied science. We did some paid ads, and the numbers spiked incredibly, and just, I think, having people respond as well through emails that, and things like that was really great. And I think that those kinds of things are really surprising too, because with very little money, you can actually really get a high engagement. So I think that those kinds of things surprised me because I wasn't really sure in terms of the paid stuff or in terms of creating content specifically for social media, whether that would be a waste of time, but it turns out it was not at all. Yeah. Yep.
Thanks for your talk. Could you speak to using social media?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, actually we've done it with John quite a bit, using social media to recruit participants. The Still Here project, the one that the Instagram feed was for, we used that, we used the website, we used the Men's Health Research Program Twitter. We sort of coordinated every social media channel we had under our umbrella to recruit participants for that. And I know they were turning people away, which is great. But I think what it comes down to is knowing who you're trying to recruit. So the difference is, if you're trying to recruit, say for the prostate cancer one, an older demographic who might not be online, might not be using social media, then that might not be the best way to go. But for the Still Here project, if you're recruiting younger LGBTQ communities of people that are online already and engaging in conversations, then I think that that's the way to go. Again, it always comes back to what's your goal, what's your end goal, and who is the audience you're trying to reach, and then knowing where they are at all times, because then you can be pointed about doing that. Again, paid ads is great for that because you can target very specifically who you're trying to reach. So if you're trying to recruit a very specific cohort of people, you can sort of target on Facebook or on Twitter so that you can reach that community or that group of people to recruit them. But we've found that it's been fairly successful in terms of, survey participants for data, in terms of recruitment. It's been great. Yeah.
Partnerships too. So if it's a general population audience that you're looking to recruit, let our office know. Because your channel might not have the broad reach, but if you can partner with people, it might achieve the same thing as paid, but free. So depending on the content and who the participants are following, you might want to partner with other channels at the university or even outside of the university to get the word out. Yeah.
Any others? Okay, well, thank you so much for coming. If you do have any other questions that pop up, feel free to email me at any time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.